Wanted to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Using Seerist Technology to Anticipate and Respond to Terrorism Threats. This is really a follow-on to a webinar we did a few weeks ago back on February 26th, about our 2025 Global Terrorism Outlook. But if you didn't attend that session, don't worry, completely self-sufficient here with this webinar. And we're excited because between my colleague here, Sam Provorce, and we're going to take you through first a little bit of an understanding of what Seerist does overall and how it fits into this use case around understanding terrorism threats. And then Sam is going to actually walk you through a demo and give you some real life examples of how our capabilities and content can be used in that specific use case. So just for introductions, I'm Chris Brosnick, VP of Product Marketing here at Seerist. Mentioned Sam Provorce, our technical solutions consultant that will be taking you through the demo in just a couple of minutes. I wanted to start off just give you a high-level sense of Seerist capabilities and really how we do what we do. First, it starts with millions of data points that we collect every single day, and we use what we call verified AI. That is a term we invented, but really what it's meant to convey is the fact that, yes, we do use the most modern AI capabilities using generative AI techniques and large language models, but we also have the benefit of over 120 analysts globally through our partnership with Control Risk that can actually provide very deep insight and understanding of world events as they unfold. And so by merging those two together, that creates what we call here verified AI. Secondly, we're really trying to help uncover patterns that could impact your business interests, your organization's interests. I know we have people on this call from all sorts of organizations, including the military and the government space. So at the end of the day, we're helping you know what are the things that are going to impact or could impact where your people, where your assets, where your facilities are all around the world. We have this global analyst network that I mentioned with our partnership with Control Risks. And our real focus and what differentiates us from a lot of the players in the space is being able to provide that credibility and transparency so you have confidence in the information. A lot of data out there, a lot of tools that provide, nonstop alerting and identification of events. But how do you make sense of it? And how do you know when things are real and they're starting to become bigger? So we'll talk about that again today, specifically as it relates to global terrorism. I wanted to just give three quick examples of how our platform fits into this space. And we like to look at it in these three levels, which is foresight, insight, and action. And just to give you a couple of examples here on the foresight front, which is really about anticipating and understanding what could happen next. We provide a number of tools. One of the most unique ones, I believe, is what you see in the middle of the screen there. We call this our Pulse AI score. And essentially every country in the world, every major city in the world, we rate from 0 to 100. And on an every 5-minute basis, we continually update that score and change it based on current events. So this is in real time, it's using AI, but it actually has been proven, and we've had many cases now where we've documented that we have specific patterns in this pulse score that are predictive of potential decreases in stability in a country or a region. And again, as terrorism fits into that scenario, quite often that's one of the precursors that could indicate a change. So that's reflected in the color coding on our maps that you see there. We also just unveiled a new capability called Discover and Explore AI on the right-hand side. And this really allows you to take any event that happens from day to day and dissect it into its component parts to understand the full context of what's going on. And again, seeing as things are changing and understanding what that might mean for the future. So put all that into that foresight category. The next category here is insight. And this is really about the here and now and knowing what's occurring. Are there hotspots in the world, as you see on the left? where there's a certain incident that just occurred, being able to have understanding of what scenarios could play out. And so with our analyst partners that control risks, we have the ability to sort of forecast, different scenarios and understand what the different potentials might be as time goes on. And then finally, in action, this is obviously where the rubber hits the road for everybody as a customer. One example of how we give you tools to take action is what we call our asset dashboard on the left. But essentially, you're able to upload every single location, every point of interest that has an impact on your organization, and see in real time as the threat profile is changing for that location. Are there events happening that you need to be aware of? Is there a decrease in that stability and so forth? And then you can drill down into various locations on the right and get up-to-date reporting that you can provide to others in your organization. So a lot of great technology and really amazing capabilities we're excited to share with you. And after Sam's done, I'll give you some ideas here on what you could do next after this session if you're interested. So with that being said, I want to go on to the live demo and let Sam take over from here and share some good examples of what we do around terrorism.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So let me share my screen. Alrighty, so yeah, it looks like I got the right one there. Appreciate everybody joining today. Sam Provorst, I am out here in Arlington, Virginia, USA. It looks like we have a good cohort from across the world. So appreciate everybody joining in the morning, the evening, the night for some of you, I'm sure. Quick background about myself. I've been with the company for 5 years now, almost 5 years. Looking at a variety of different roles. Previously was an analyst, a commercial GSOC analyst, so I have some familiarity with the analyst workflows. I know every organization does things slightly differently, but just to give you some context of where I'm coming from. So today, as Chris mentioned, what we want to cover is kind of a follow-on from that previous webinar. I believe a link will be sent out after this as well if you didn't get a chance to attend. That was really focused on two of our partners at Control Risks, Serena Pilkington and Jonathan Wood, talking about upcoming trends in 2025 in terrorism, kind of broad trends, what they're looking at, what are the areas to watch, things like that. So would highly recommend checking that out when you have a chance after this. So we're kind of going to build on top of that. As Chris mentioned, I'll get into a demo of the live platform after I walk through this one use case. So there's a lot of things that we're doing in terms of terrorism as well as other events that come into our system. The goal really for an analyst team, whether that's an intel analyst, GSOC operator, a watch officer, wherever you're coming from in terms of your security function at your organization. A lot of times, maybe the end result, the finished reports are going to be different, but the ways that you arrive at, collections, exploitation, and then analysis of that information, that does look pretty similar, and I think that's what we've seen across organizations that we've worked with, groups that we've talked with. So I wanted to start with this example, just recent developments in global terrorism. This is a very high-level report focusing on a few specific incidents that occurred at the end of last year, as well as some broader trends that we're seeing. So really, this is intended to give you a high-level idea of what the capabilities of the platform are. Most of the screenshots in here, or all of the screenshots, are coming directly from the platform. So I'll show you how to get to those things when we move into the live demo here after this. So first thing that I wanted to cover, and I think this is relevant depending on your area of responsibility. Maybe you're not focused on Europe, but you can apply this, of course, to any location. I saw it looks like something came through the chat about hyperlocal, local versus regional, and of course that's something that we specialize in, is getting whether it's that macro view or that micro view. What you can see here is a few different things on the screen, so I'm just going to walk through them. We can see some of these incidents coming through. This is directly from our Intel team. They sit on the Seerist side of the house. It's about 20 analysts that are doing a follow the sun model, looking at incidents as they occur, building our database out, trying to find ways to provide essentially as many data points as possible in relation to terrorism threats, and the risk to your business itself. So what that means is, in this case, we can see an explosive planted inside a letterbox, right? This is going to receive a few different things here, categories that this applies to, sectors that are affected. This can be anything from the government to military to private property, the assets affected as well. So we can see, each one of these is also going to have a link out to the original article. This is obviously something that's really important for a lot of our clients, seeing that they, need to source these things when they're including them in a finished product, or just to, kind of get the confidence in the sourcing to make sure that this is legitimate. This has a high level of veracity, et cetera. The other thing you'll notice here down on the bottom is these visualizations, and I'll show a few examples of this as well in the platform. This is talking about, in this case, attack type, sector affected. So these are all things that are tagged by our analysts. So this allows you to pare down the data depending on what you're looking for. If you're very interested in, kinetic events, explosives, things like that, you can use those filters within the platform to pare it down. And you can also view these visualizations on the fly as well. So for things like over-the-shoulder reports, right? Somebody gives you a quick tasking, you're able to do this very quickly, as well as longer form, finished products. You're able to include these in those finished products as well. So moving on, looking at a specific incident. So end of last year, beginning of this year, January 1st in New Orleans, vehicle ramming on Bourbon Street, caused deaths of at least 14 people. So just showing a few ways that you would identify this within the system itself. The first thing that you would see come through is this breaking news report. So I've mentioned our Intel analyst team that sits on the Seerist side of the house. They're also reporting on these breaking events. So this is essentially something that reaches an anomalous threshold, right? Something that is uncommon within this area, that is a high threshold. But maybe when it's first reported, we're less clear about veracity, about attribution, things like that. But the goal behind these is really the speed, right? So the time to identification of these events is key in this case. So we can see here, the initial report as it comes out, you would receive this in your inbox. A very quick summary of what's happened, concise, not going into too many details, is again, the goal behind this is speed. Then you would also see in a lot of cases a follow-up for this incident. So, as more reports come out, as the picture becomes more clear, you'd receive a follow-on to this to identify, okay, this is the situation. And this is something that, again, I'll walk through in the live demo, but really useful for an analyst who's monitoring these incidents, especially with a wide remit. You're able to look at these breaking events around the world, just within your area of responsibility, et cetera. I know there are certain events, even if it happens across the globe, could have ramifications to your operations. So the goal here is really to give you, that speed and decision making. The other things you'll see here is, as Chris mentioned, this is our pulse stability score. Think of this as, a continuously updated score that's tracking to, events on the ground. We've established a baseline for cities, for U.S. counties, for regions around the world, as well as countries. So this allows you to kind of get granular. This is the pulse for New Orleans, the city itself specifically, and you can see this drop, leading up to this event and on the day of the event. So this corresponds with, if you're looking at, for example, a screen that's up on the GSOC wall, you can identify places where we've seen a significant pulse drop. That might be an indicator for you to go into the system, identify what's happening there, and start to, begin your process. One other thing that I'll mention is these AI emotions. So we have a few different algorithms in the system that are especially designed in order to provide you information. Again, those data points that might be useful in analysis. And so you can see here 6 top level emotions that we're looking at. This is based on the text, the words, the syntax within the article, identifying, in this case, a spike in fear reports. And then we see this kind of follow on sadness and fear, as well as the extent and the impact of the incident becomes more known. So again, providing analysts, providing users with a way to both report on this event as it initially happens, as well as identify follow-on knock-on impacts to this incident. Just looking at another specific incident here, similar lens. So this is the vehicle ramming in Mannheim that occurred at the end of last year. So similar things here, right? We're seeing this pulse score drop for Mannheim. We're seeing a fairly high level of stability, not a lot of volatility leading up to this. A very significant drop when that occurred. Again, same thing here. You would receive this breaking news event. You could also go back into our database and find one of these Intel verified events, our Intel Teams verified events. And again, in this case, you're seeing a huge spike in these specific emotions on the day of the attack there as well. One other thing I'll just quickly note, because this screenshot here I think is helpful. This is one of our ways that you can quickly get information out of the system. This is an auto-generated report that we call Scribe AI. The intent behind it is to summarize what's happened in this location over the past, several days. And so in this case, it's giving us, what are those drivers of stability? Because I know a lot of times people look at Pulse, they understand it, it's intuitive, but they also want to get behind, what caused that score to drop. So this is just an example of what contributed to that. So these, again, going into the breaking events, we have a few different ones here. You can kind of see the spread of what we're looking at. So shooting in Queens, bomb threat in Paris, bomb threat at the Hickam down in Hawaii. So these are all ways, again, that you can see how these would come through. I won't read this, but take a look there. But the idea, again, behind these is time to identification of these incidents, so that you are able to start looking into news, start looking into social media, other feeds that we provide in the platform. But this is really intended to be, for those groups that have either a smaller team, groups that have a very specific remit, or those who are looking, worldwide, for example. This allows them to quickly pivot between major events, and allows them to kind of dive into what they need to focus on. Okay, so shifting gears slightly, looking in this case at the analysis coming from the control risk team, as well as the Intel team on the Seerist side of the house. So again, just referencing that webinar that was done a few weeks ago with Serena and Jonathan, this is the kind of reports that they were producing, right? So major incidents, forecasts, outlooks for, quarterly outlooks, intended to provide you with a bit of foresight into what trends they're seeing, what after action reports for major incidents, which I'll show after this slide, and then give you, a few not recommendations, but different ways that we're seeing these things change. So in this case, of course, we're seeing Q1 2025. These are a few things that came out when this report was first published, talking about some drivers of instability and insecurity within the Middle East. We're also seeing, for example, visualizations. I know this is helpful for users that are reporting up the chain. It's always really nice to give a quickly consumable visual instead of having to type a bunch of words that may or may not be read. Of course, anything that can hook your audience is ideal. We're also seeing, again, this analysis of these, religious holidays kind of being a target for these types of attacks. And then, of course, this is a follow-up to that New Orleans attack. So this would come out, I believe, a few days after that incident, talking about, updates to, the expectation for these types of vehicle-borne attacks, where, attribution, anything that's identified with this incident, just providing a lot more context to that event as it, after the fact. And you can see here, again, kind of how it's structured is an overview, a few insights into the trends, and then outlooks for the future here over the next few months. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears over to the platform itself. And, I just want to cover a few things that I talked about during those slides. I know there's, a pretty wide range of folks here, so just going to get into a specific use case, but I, hope you can kind of apply this to your specific area of interest as well. So we're taking kind of the mindset of a GSOC analyst who receives this report in their email. So this is those breaking events in email form. They're going to see this explosion come through in Mogadishu on March 18th, which is 2 days ago. They're seeing this roadside bomb explode near the convoy of the president of Somalia. This is a really good indicator for that analyst to start diving into the system, try and identify some ways that they can, respond to this event, and also, send this up to their consumers as well. So once they receive this email, They might dive into the system, and then after a few hours, they're going to receive updates about this. In this case, about 20 minutes later, with more information. So initial report, very bare bones. Again, trying to get information out to our clients, and then in this case, providing some updates about what this looks like. And then finally, when we see attribution, Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for this attack, that's released as well within the system. So this analyst can move through from identification of the report to maybe a quick sit rep within a few minutes based on the reporting that's coming from our Intel team. And then moving on, somebody might come over here and try and dive into the specific news and social media that's coming through, whether it's from X, from local news reporting, or it's specific incidents coming from, places like Facebook, news, other social media platforms. They can dive into this and they'll be able to see, some reports here coming out of the country. This can help with that veracity, identify a few different things. I know the text is small here, but each incident that comes through, each piece of content that comes through, it's going to be tagged with different, a few different factors here. So in this case, events, these are, when we talk about AI, kind of a buzzword term, but I think in this case, what it's really doing is helping to group these incidents into single buckets. So you can say, just show me terrorism events in this location. Tell me where this original language is coming through. I just want to read sources on the ground, etc. So then they'll move over here onto what we call the watch dashboard for this location. And you can see here this live pulse trend line. So kind of moving from that GSOC use case, identification of the report, they've typed up maybe a few things that they're interested in. They've sent it off to their consumers, their stakeholders. So somebody maybe following this a few days afterwards, today's Thursday, so 2 days later, they're trying to look at maybe pre-indicators for this incident. And the first thing that they might do is they kind of look through this trend line is identify that on March 11th, most recent dip that they're seeing, they can just click on this, receive some updates about what's actually happening here. Why did the score dip on this day? Because this could potentially be relevant for any after action, or situation report that's being released. So in this case, what we're seeing here is a discussion. This is that scribe report that I mentioned. And we're seeing this incident that occurred that day, which is Al-Shabaab storming this hotel in Somalia. So this is one of those major indicators. Of course, Al-Shabaab very active in this area. This is something that, folks who follow Somalia might be aware of, but I think seeing these, the close timeliness, right? This is just over a week prior to the vehicle bombing on the president's convoy. This is something that they would be able to identify. And then moving past this, somebody who's maybe a regional analyst or somebody who has a more strategic view, they can dive into the country itself. And maybe what they're trying to do is, start building out a framework. They might receive a task from, director level up the chain, somebody saying, hey, when is the next event going to occur? When is the next attack going to happen? Obviously, this is an impossible question to answer, but what they can start to do is build out a framework for where, what are the drivers of this instability? What are the drivers of this terrorism? And so that they can come over to this country page, diving into the security risk here. In this case, we can specifically look at terrorism, though, of course, there's a lot of factors that do contribute to this situation. And what this is human written analysis coming again from control risks, providing a very high level static view of recent incidents in this location, as well as some recent analysis updates. So longer form reporting talking about specific incidents that have occurred. So what they can start to do is build their framework for identifiers, any indicators that might be something that could be a trigger, and then they can move on to the next task. Finally, somebody who is maybe has a broader view, they're being tasked with something, let's look at not just Somalia, but another region that we're focused on. So this gets passed over to someone who's focused on the Sahel in Africa. And what they can do is very simple here. I have a search set up looking at It's 9 different countries in the Sahel region, and just turning on this terrorism event model, right? So a very quick search. And what I'm getting here is, a view over the past 60 days of what incidents have occurred here. So this can help me to start to build out what trends are we seeing, right? I can see this on the map here. And then I can also pull out this trend line. So this is directly applying to the incidents that I've pulled up here on the search results, and this will provide me with a view into what's happening in this location, trends over time, and we can see once this loads here, kind of where these trends have gone, what sorts of different. Let's see here if I can very quickly reload this. What kind of trends we're identifying in this case, with respect to my specific search. So this is just a good way for somebody who's maybe looking at broader trends, identifying different things that have occurred in their location of interest. We have the past 3 days here. I'll just pull it back a bit. Um, Looking at 60 days, we can see over time the number of incidents as they occur, and we can get a sense again of the specific terrorism incidents and total incidents over time. So in this case, we've actually seen a pretty big spike here on the 19th. So this is something that someone who's trying to, maybe write a longer form, broader report could dive into. Finally, what they can use as well is just our Intel analyst tagged events. And again, we can view trends. We can also download a report directly from the system. So I'll just show that here. So this is just going to give us an overview of those trends as tagged by our Intel analysts. So a bit more of a higher fidelity view here. Going back in this database, sectors affected, trends over time, as well as, again, those attack types, and then a write-up of the most recent events that we've seen in this location.
Sam, I think we're going to have to wrap it up because we've only
Yep,
got 1 minute left, and I want to see if we can at least get a couple of questions here.
perfect.
But
Yep,
thank you. No,
I'll
great
call
stuff.
it
As you
there.
guys can see, there's a lot to cover. So certainly we want to give you guys a chance to learn more. So before we get to some questions, I just wanted to point out that you can reach out to us to schedule a more one-on-one demo, and we'd be happy to do that. So you can just email at info@seerist.com or go to our website. And then also, we're going to have this recording available. So if you want to go back and watch, all of you that have attended today, you can go back and look at all the great stuff Sam was showing a little more carefully. One last little shout out here. For those of you, and I know we have quite a few people on the call that are in the New York area. If you're interested, if you're going to go to CSO 360, we will be there next week exhibiting. Our head of global intelligence, Melissa Newberg, will be presenting. So feel free to join us in New York if you're attending this event and you're in town. So let's just try to get a couple of questions in the minute, 30 seconds or so we have left. I know there was a question here, Sam, related to, I assume this person meant our stability scoring at the country level only, or does it go down to local? I know we do it for major cities as well, right, Sam?
Yep,
Beyond that,
exactly.
anything more detailed?
Yeah, so you'll have, major cities will receive that stability scoring. Also, you'll also see U.S. counties. That's kind of our first, second order administrative boundary, or third order. And then we're also seeing things at the regional level, which allows you to, if you are looking at a more austere region, it allows for a bit of a deep dive into things that have occurred there that maybe aren't close to a city itself.
That's good. Yeah, no, good point. Another one here really quickly. How's the system defining terrorism? Is it when you filter by it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, I'll try to keep the answer short, but happy to talk more about this. So I briefly mentioned that those are large language models. So what we're doing is, comparing those against a database of our positively tagged terrorism events. And then what happens when an article comes through, it's compared against that database. I believe it's about 10,000 articles and pieces of content that it's compared against. And then it's being sorted into that. The other benefit, I think, of using the large language models in this case is they can be adjusted, updated, as we see things that are fitting into that category or not. The system is identifying that, and adjusting based on what we're seeing in the world.
One last one here in the chat. How are you scraping social media posts? How do you select which ones matter? I know that's a couple of pieces to that, Sam, in
Yeah,
terms
it's a
of how we
great
do it.
question, and I love talking about this, so I appreciate you asking. So the very short version, and I always like to shout this team out. We do have a collections team that sits on the Seerist side of the house. Their entire goal is making sure that the content we're curating in the platform is going to be relevant for our clients. So, two aspects to that. One is finding, that right signal to noise ratio. So, in terms of what we're pulling in, we've identified a few different, for example, social media platforms. Whether that's major ones, mainstream ones, or ones that are more of a either have a foreign component, are coming from a foreign country, or that have a particularly high level of, extremist specific content. In terms of how we're actually doing that, a lot of that is on the developer side in terms of scraping, pulling in larger databases. The other aspect I'll mention is if there are things that you feel like we're not pulling in, maybe you have a very specific remit, something that you're very interested in that you don't see in the system, we can work with collections to make sure that you actually get that information as well. So that can look like, sending across handles for social media accounts, sending across specific research questions, things like that, so that we can make sure that we're actually getting the data that you need. Yeah,
All
great
right. Well,
question.
listen, thanks, Sam, for all the great info. Thanks all of you for hanging on. Most people stayed on. I know the links were put into the chat for the follow up and for the recording, so feel free to do that. And hopefully, we'll see some of you in New York next week. And if not, follow up with us and we can do a more personalized demo. So thanks. Have a great rest of your week and weekend, everybody.
Thanks all.